I'm going to crack on. So welcome to this update on Microsoft Identity, primarily Entra, of course. So I'm Tom Owen, one of the architects of Kocho, mainly work in the enterprise identity team. So Entra ID governance, but increasingly that remit increases along with everything else Entra. So hoping to take you through some interesting updates today. Before we start, the webinar is being recorded. We will share this with attendees later in the week, or if any colleagues weren't able to make it. If you do have questions, please use the Q&A panel. We'll try to get through those at the end of the session. There should be time at the end. But if there isn't, or if there isn't time for everything, or we can't answer something immediately, we will be sure to follow that up afterwards with an email. So on the agenda today, some general Entra updates. So this is just some public information for now. So around authentication, conditional access and security, and some updates around Entra ID governance functionality. And there's a whole new piece around agentic AI, which is Agent ID. Then some specific updates for global secure access. Wanted to make sure as well that if you haven't seen how it works, that we have a small demo there as well. So we're going to look at accessing a SSH shell using global secure access from a remote device with phishing resistant MFA in front of it. Similarly, with verified ID and face check, that's obviously a hot topic at the moment, given all the retail breaches of late. So this is one way forward to protect from phishing and other help desk attacks. I'll also do a small demo of that based around Microsoft's demo pack, just to give you a feel for how that works. There are a few reminders as well. So some changes coming up, deprecations, etc. So just to point out any of those you haven't seen before, and a small slide on what's coming next. Apologies. So starting with authentication. Now, some of this you may have seen already, but just to highlight, the application-based authentication for Entra Connect, this is an important one. So up until now, it has been simple auth, username and password, using a service account. So this replaces that with certificate authentication using an application registration in Entra. So do remember that your Connect service is essentially a privileged user. It can write and update, users and groups in Entra. So under some frameworks now, all privileged users need to have strong authentication. So this is one way of doing that. So have a look at that. Only in public preview at the moment, but it is a good thing. Some improvements for guests as well coming. So you may have seen this already if you sign into other tenants, but you will now see both the organization you're signing into and your own home organization logo as well. So you can get a bit more of a feel as to what you're signing into. So that's been improved on. There's also improvements to certificate-based authentication. So whereby if there's no revocation list present, it will just automatically fail. So that's a security enhancement there. There's also improvements to the trust store. So we can now prioritize and support bulk uploads of certificates. And coming in preview, we can now bind certificate authorities to different user groups as well. So it's not just a general rule for all. Looking into iOS Authenticator. So previously a Microsoft account was needed to back up your credentials in there or your Authenticator accounts. You can now do this via iCloud, so a personal account isn't needed anymore. So a nice improvement for Apple users who may not have a Microsoft account. That, of course, follows the same rules as before. So if it's an enterprise account, you're going to need to sign back in to restore things like passwordless and other secure means of authentication. And similarly, with Authenticator, so passkeys, at the moment, passkeys are one authentication method. So whether it's Windows Hello, FIDO2 keys, or passkey and Authenticator coming soon. So this is one bit of preview news. Coming in November, there'll be control over configurations per group. So we can decide if certain users can use YubiKey specifically, or FIDO2 keys rather, or whether other people can use passkeys via Authenticator, for example. So there's more granularity coming there. There'll also be more support for other providers of passkey as well, outside of the ones that we have today. So with conditional access and security, I guess the biggest news is Security Copilot at Entra has gone GA. Now this impacts a number of the things on the upcoming slides. So, in isolation, of course, if there is a standalone portal, so securitycopilot.microsoft.com, and here you can use it in a Copilot ChatGPT sense, ask questions, and you can also add plugins. There's Microsoft plugins for various tools like Defender. There's also third-party plugins available now that interact with M365, Entra, and Azure resources. So have a look at that. But if you're using Entra now as well, there is a pop-out blade specifically for Copilot. So this is context aware of the screen you're on, so that can actually be used to ask questions as you go through certain screens. A nice one is investigating conditional access or sign-in rules. You can use natural language essentially to get answers to queries about what's been happening. And I think the best use case that I've seen so far really around agentic AI is the conditional access optimization agent. So this is something that's going to be really useful. I've got a screenshot on the next slide to show you. If you haven't seen that yet, it does require a SCU in Azure, so a security compute unit. So there is a cost associated, but it's quite cheap. By default, it runs on a 24-hour schedule, gives you insights every day that you look at it. You can also run it ad hoc as well to get more information. But essentially, we see organizations all the time that have dozens, sometimes 100 or more conditional access policies that have grown over time. It almost becomes impossible to get on top of them. So this is going to be really useful for some of those organizations, or even if you have fewer policies. So not only does it analyze and spot gaps, it can also spot ones which could be merged perhaps because there's similar policies in both. So it's really useful for that. And you can actually resolve the issues that it detects directly from the portal. Now, what's new to that is it now includes user and sign-in risk as well. So if you have P2 licensing, it can now evaluate those particular rules around user and sign-in risk. As I say as well, all of this can be done through natural language in terms of what it says to you and how you respond and ask questions. Also new to conditional access is audience reporting. So, you may have seen in the past, or you may have found in the past, when things like Teams and SharePoint that are naturally interlinked, user can be doing something in one and actually interacts with the other, and it could be hard to see in conditional access which is actually being pointed to. So this will actually show you, if someone signed into SharePoint or Teams and they've inherently accessed the SharePoint resource or used the SharePoint API, then that will come up in that conditional access reporting. So it makes it easier to spot where you may have a policy affecting one of the other Microsoft services, and it could be other services as well where they use multiple audiences within the same request. That ties into the next one as well. So, Microsoft apps were obviously difficult to have granular policies with in the past because they came under M365 apps or Office 365 in the past. There are now individual applications, so you can have specific policies for each of those, notwithstanding, of course, the fact that they may need to be similar in some cases because of the above point around audience reporting. So just have to tread carefully with that. But it does mean when you find evaluated resources are using multiple audiences, then we can actually configure policies that factor in both or more. Another nice one for security teams and investigations is a linkable token identifiers. So now if someone has logged in, via Entra, via their device Windows Hello for Business, in the past, it was hard to detect where that token was being used downstream in other applications. So now in supported applications, which is typically Microsoft apps at the moment, Entra, SharePoint, Teams, Exchange, we can actually see that the same token has a linked identifier. So in sign-in logs and reporting, we can look up security IDs. We can also do advanced hunting around that as well. So if you're aware of a token breach, we can actually see where that's being used downstream in your services as well. So just to show you, as I say, the conditional access optimization agent, which I talked about. So this is a general look at how it feels. So as you can see here, you get daily suggestions or suggestions based on the last run, which, as I say, could be every 24 hours on a schedule, or you can run one ad hoc. Bearing in mind, as I say, there are costs associated, which you can look into as well separately. But if it's actually quite a small cost if you're only running for this. You may have Security Copilot doing other things, of course, so it all accumulates, of course. But for this particular thing, it's not a big ask for the types of results you get. So here we have suggested steps, as I say, things that you should be able to take. You can remediate yourself or automatically remediate things, as you can see there, policy updates, new policies. Also gives you more insights than we had before in terms of unprotected users and that kind of thing. So well worth a look at if you haven't done already, especially if you're finding it hard to get on top of sprawling conditional access policies. So with ID governance, there are a few new changes and lots of things gone GA. So you can see there is a lot of development happening in this space. There's a few new key features we're waiting for that hopefully we can update you on soon. But at the moment, things like the lifecycle workflows with Security Copilot, so similarly to the other Copilot features or Security Copilot features, they have gone GA as well. So like conditional access, we can actually use natural language to configure and monitor our lifecycle workflows. So worth a look if you've got lots of those. A nice one now as well for leaver scenarios and emergency terminations, perhaps on-demand flows. You might want to do this. You can automatically revoke all the refresh tokens for a user based on the lifecycle workflow. So when somebody is offboarded, so they could be through a natural process, through a leave date being entered in the HR system, flowing through accounts disabled. We also want to remove or revoke any refresh tokens they have. That can be done as well. As I say, might be more important in the emergency termination scenario, but it just means that if people are still signed in elsewhere, just simply blocking their account won't stop them from, it will stop them from signing in again, but it won't remove their existing token. So this is a way to do that automatically. Otherwise, until now, you'd need to do that against Graph or go into the portal and do that for a user individually. Custom security attribute provisioning from HR has now gone GA. So these attributes are typically for containing sensitive data. So not everybody who has access to Entra or a user profile can see them. You need a specific Entra role. They can be used for other things downstream, but previously they would have to be populated another way. Now we can actually configure that from our HR system. So we have a sensitive attribute coming from HR. Could be something that not everybody needs to see. You know, maybe a personal phone number, or maybe a date of birth is required for another system that doesn't typically need to be in the HR side, but there may be something that we want to provision or something related to their role, leave of absence, etc. So all of these things may not be for everyone's ears and eyes, but we do need other systems to interact with it. So that's a nice way of doing that. API-driven provisioning. So this has obviously been around for standard cloud for a while. This is now available for US government if anyone is working on that. Now, there's a few public preview announcements as well. So this is a nice one. Speaking to a client about this yesterday. So, you know, up until now, approvals and access packages were what they were. It was an email to the defined approvers, and they would either respond or not. We've had cases of, or heard of cases of people, not seeing their emails. Obviously, email is a bit legacy these days. So this allows us to completely expand on how approvals are done. The use case that's come up of late is having a notification be sent to Teams instead. So we can use this as part of the ID governance queue. So we can potentially, turn off the default approval flow, trigger a logic app instead. That logic app can go off, and basically we can have a workflow that talks to another system to look up requirements, or it could be sending a message to somebody on Teams. They can interact with that, and their response would be used just like it would via the email method or via the My Access portal. So it's a nice new way of being able to do that. You may also want to do it for certification reasons. So it may not be a human approval you want. You may want to know that this person has X certificate in a database, so we can actually use that for this purpose as well. So although it's not human approval, it could be approval through the fact that they've got certification for something elsewhere. Now, suggested access packages. This is now on by default for environments, so you should be seeing this already, especially where you have sprawling lists of access packages. On that note, there is some news recently that the way in which access package policies are shown is going to change. So basically, if anything that's not hidden, so will be shown to everybody. So that essentially means if you have a policy that has any members or groups in it, everybody is going to be able to see that. They just won't be able to get access to it. So it means the lists, I guess there's some optimization reasons in the back end, but ultimately people are going to be able to see all access packages that aren't hidden, whether they have access to them or not. And on top of that, we'll have the suggested access package feature instead. So although there won't be many relevant to them, they can still search through them. What will be relevant is the suggested list, and this is based off the company hierarchy. So the system's able to see what a user's peers are typically requesting, what may be typical for that job role, and suggesting that to people rather than having to look through a big list of access packages. And finally on that one, so cross-tenant synchronization across Microsoft Cloud. So of course, it's been around in standard public cloud for a while. We can now sync in and out of government and China cloud as well. So that's quite useful for some organizations to be able to do that. So some, bigger news. If anyone went to the likes of InfoSec this year, you will have heard a lot about agentic AI. It's obviously, the latest, revolution slash threat in the security world. So a lot, increasingly organizations are using AI agents. Copilot in itself, if you're using Copilot internally, people can create agents, etc. So they are going to start to build. There could be third-party agents as well. Some optimists even imagine there being agents in the organizational chart in the near future. So you may have several AI agents working under you, doing specific tasks for you. Case in point, though, is that there is going to be another identity attack vector, essentially, because increasingly all of these are essentially application registrations with permissions. Now, these are going to be categorized differently moving forward. So, of course, we have user IDs and application IDs. Agent IDs is going to be a new category just for these AI agents. So it just means we can easily spot them, filter on them when we're looking at application lists and user lists, and also create policies around them. So conditional access, of course, will be possible, although this does fall under the workload ID premium piece. But something to have a look at. At the moment, that's in public preview, and that is free to look at for the time being. So with global secure access, now none of these are massive improvements, but there's been a lot of enhancements made, mainly bug fixes, performance type things, things around stability and responsiveness, as you can see there. So both the connector and the client has been improved of late. So this affects both private access and internet access. Well, sorry, the connector is only for private access, but the client it improves both internet access and private access. So some nice things there. We also got the outbound proxy support as well. So if you do need to route traffic via a proxy before it goes out to the internet, we can do that. On the client side as well, small improvements there, UI, diagnostics. Diagnostics are a big piece of both, as you can see. So there is a lot more troubleshooting assistance for you in both cases. The Windows running on ARM installer as well had some issues. That's been improved upon. And the other one is around the MPRT cleanup. So previously, rules were necessarily cleaned up when the client was disabled and you could get caching and DNS issues. But now there is a rule. So if the client does get disabled, anything that Global Secure Access has created locally in Windows should be removed, and it goes back to its standard name resolution policies. What is nice though in terms of new features, so public preview, TLS inspection. So this is for internet access. So where supported and where you have your own PKI, of course, to sign these TLS certificates, we can start to do real-time decryption of HTTPS traffic. So we can start to look into packets with sensitive content, malicious content, etc. DLP starts to become a thing. So yeah, a nice feature that a lot of people have been waiting on. As I say, I wanted to make sure any of you haven't seen private access in action, had a feel for it. So in this particular demo, we are going to SSH to an LDAP server using PuTTY. The difference is I am going to do this from a VM running on my Kocho machine. It's got nothing to do with the sandbox environment where the servers are running. The thing is, of course, that my VM is running the Global Secure Access client, which is routed through the connector server in that environment. So if we take a look through, I will go through some of the config as well. So in this case, we have an app server set up with our private network connector. This used to be the application proxy connector. We have an app server. This is the one we're looking at. It's on the same subnet in this case, but we could do it from another subnet, another VNet if there is VNet peering. But in this case, the LDAP server and the app server are on the same subnet. Here, I have an application set up for this particular client. So the nice thing about having individual applications, individual global secure access application set up is that we can apply conditional access policies uniquely to that particular application. So we could group things together if there's reason to have application segments across multiple applications, but of course, then we can't be so granular with the policy. So it depends on the requirements. But in this case, we want to be able to access LDAP box port 22. So I need to be added to the users and groups for that. As I say, I have a conditional access policy in this case, so we can specify this particular application. And in this case, I want to be accessing it with phishing resistant MFA and coming from a compliant device. So both of those are selected at the moment. So here's my VM. As I say, it's running locally on my machine. Quick ipconfig shows us we're not getting any company IP address. It's just the default Hyper-V address, internal home router address. When I have the global secure access client connected, I can open PuTTY like I normally would, and I can actually enter the IP address of my LDAP server. What's nice about this is, of course, it doesn't support modern authentication, but it's the network tunnel itself that does. So before I can actually access that resource, global secure access pops up. I need to do my phishing resistant MFA. So in this case, I have Windows Hello for Business on that VM set up. And once that's done, the tunnel is opened and I'm able to log in as normal as I would do into PuTTY. So yeah, very nice system if you're running remote users and devices. And of course, you can have application-based traffic rather than always on VPNs and this type of thing. So it works very well. And of course, if I had failed phishing resistant MFA or failed conditional access or authentication in some way, PuTTY simply would not allow the connection. So yeah, it does work both ways. So this, as I say, verified ID and face check is a hot topic at the moment. Of course, we've all heard about the retail breaches of late, some of which came through phishing or vishing to help desk and pretending to be other people. So what can we do in these use cases? Now, you know, in small organizations, in the past, you might distrust the sound of someone's voice. Obviously, we can't do that anymore in the age of generative AI. Security questions can easily be found out. There's a lot of publicly available information about people, or you can, you know, skim a LinkedIn profile. You may be able to find things out. So again, security questions aren't great. What we need is something more verifiable, and even verified ID by itself does have some level of assurance. So if you haven't seen it, you'll see it in a second in the demo, but it's essentially like an ID card that you have in your authenticator wallet. You would need to authenticate in order to get one in the first place. So you'd have controls around having one. But ultimately, if you only present that particular verified ID, that credential, it only means someone has access to your phone. So, you know, ideally your phone is secured using biometrics, but if you had a simple PIN, someone else was able to get access, we still don't actually know that it's that person. So what face check allows us to do is to request a real-time selfie from the user, and then Azure AI services can actually do a match typically against the company profile photo. There's a few ways to do this. We could actually hand it off to an external database of photos if you want. Obviously, if there's company profile photo, it can't be a picture of a cat. It needs to be a relatively corporate looking photo. You know, the level of assurance that you get back will vary. Generally, it's over 90%. But of course, if someone is, you know, wearing a hat and glasses, it may still see that it's them, but the assurance level will be lower. So, you know, there needs to be some sense checking around those company photos, but it will work to a degree as long as it is that person, just with less certainty. So from a help desk scenario, what we can do is, you know, somebody calls up, or perhaps even you could do it also for a self-service service ITSM portal ticket requests. When someone's opening a request, you could also ask them to do this. More importantly, maybe is over the phone. If someone has no way of validating themselves, they haven't signed in, we can actually request a face check from them. So we can either get them to scan a QR code. We can also send a deep link through to them, which they can open, which will open in Authenticator, and they can actually be requested to do that live selfie. And then it will go through the process, which I'll show in a second. And at Help Desk, we can either in the portal or in a third-party service like Teams, we can send a notification to a channel that somebody has successfully completed their face check. Now, none of the facial data is shared. The Azure AI services do process it for a moment, but it's immediately deleted. Help Desk themselves don't see that photo, so it doesn't actually matter where they are or what they're doing, not that we care. But ultimately, all we're getting is the the assurance level back from that particular face check. Before I get into the demo, though, of course, just to say there are other use cases for this. So one of the earlier use cases, which was a little more relevant post-COVID, but still could be useful for some organizations, is for remote employee onboarding. So this does have some face check element to it, but it's not the same face check piece. So this could be potentially before somebody has a company profile photo. They've never actually signed in before. They haven't sent you anything. So what we can do is issue them an onboarding link, and that would actually go to a global ID verification partner. So some of them are listed there. There are several others. And what would happen there is that third party would actually do that assurance check. So they would take a picture of government ID, do a live selfie. If the face matches and those name details match what you have in Entra ID, we can then, for example, issue a temporary access pass automatically for them to onboard themselves. So similar to someone coming into work on the first day and giving HR their passport remotely, they are able to prove they are who they say they are with government ID, and then be onboarded automatically or self-service or provisioning into things like autopilot or logging into Windows through the issuance of credentials. So can work very nicely if you have a use case for it. Increasingly, of course, we are seeing more people back in the office, especially for their first day, but it is a very useful tool to have if necessary. The other piece, if you have ID governance, is so high assurance access to sensitive resources. So in an access package, if you have ID governance, you can very easily request a specific verified ID credential in the request. So before anybody goes through an approval flow, anything like that, the access package will require that they show their verified ID. So if you're signing in on desktop, it will present a QR code. They scan that QR code, and they may or may not have to do a face check. So again, if you want to, you can just require that they have a credential in their wallet. You could also typically now just tick a box and do a face check. And they can also have to do that same live selfie matching against the company profile photo story when they're accessing those high level resources. So if you start tying very sensitive apps or time sensitive, just in time type things, even administrative access, we can tie to access packages now because we can set expiration to hours and not days. You can start to use access packages for that. And so maybe you don't want to do it for everything, but maybe global admin, for example, that shouldn't be used very often these days. You want to make sure it really is that person. So when someone requests global admin, not only do they need approval, they need to actually show that it is them by going through the selfie matching with face check. So to show you this in action, so this is a simple demo setup. Microsoft provide the sample pack for you to set this up yourself. So we've set this up on kochodemo.co.uk. The nice thing is there's a lot of development packs around this as well, so you can actually build something into your ITSM. If you're using ServiceNow, for example, you could build something in with that, so that either people need to do this when they're raising a ticket, or you can issue something in the end. All of this is available via Graph, so we can request a QR code, request a deep link, all programmatically, and interact with other services as well. In this case, I already have my verified credentials. So on the right-hand side, this is what the standard verified employee card looks like. If anyone was at the summit last month, you would have seen our demo around setting this up, but it's very, very easy. The standard verified employee is simply a case of enabling it. People go into my account and they click get my verified ID. They scan the QR code and it essentially downloads that credential into Authenticator using the claims that it's allowed. So, in this case, it's the verified employees, the typical things like name and job information. Now, what the verified employee also does, credential also does, is if you have a company profile photo, it will pull that down into your credential as well. So that's the actual photo that's used for matching. It doesn't do, a live check against what's currently in the profile photo. So potentially somebody could set this up and then change their company profile photo to something more fun if they wanted to, because it's this credential that will be actually matched against. So there are some specific rules around how, what file size and format are used. There's a bit of limitation on large photos, but not, those rules notwithstanding, it just simply works. So again, you may need to do some auditing around mass rollout of this, making sure people have the right photo and it's compatible. Maybe you want to upload new photos to make sure it's all going to work. But in those instances, you simply get your credential. It's there, ready to use whenever you want. If you have a company profile photo, that's been downloaded and you're ready to do a face check when called upon. So back to this demo, I already have that credential, as I say. So in this demo of clicking, I already have my card. So all I'm going to do is simply present that card. So in this case, I have access to a machine that can display a QR code. So I can scan that QR code with my authenticator app, as we'll see here. Fairly standard process, as you'd imagine. Here we can see face check is required by the organization. Now it gives you some tips on doing that. And then we can start to do that face check. So this is really as quick as it takes. If it's going to fail, it fails pretty quick, and basically there'll be no results shared. You won't be able to continue with the process. So that's done. It's done a match. It will already have cleaned up any data that's taken. Now all I'm doing is sharing the result of that. So we can see here that result has been shared. We've got the face check score of 91% there. It's got the name of the person who did it. And as I say, what's even nicer is we can use a webhook to send this to Teams, so we can have a channel ready and waiting. So maybe the help desk verifications channel, all of the help desk team can look at that, and they could be sure that someone has actually done that face check score. So if it wasn't, if they didn't have access to the portal, if you want another way of it being shared and seen more easily, we could set that up. And of course, you could be more granular with how that works. So yeah, going back to the original, kind of retail attacks of late, this would have been one way that help desk could be sure it is who somebody said that the person calling is who they say they are before they continue. So now, as a help desk person, I've seen that score come through. I'm fairly confident that it is them, so I'm going to carry on with resetting their password or whatever it is I need to do. So some reminders. Hopefully you know about these already. So all of this kind of ties in together, but the old PowerShell modules have now been retired, so they need to be migrated. Similarly with Graph API, those service principals and apps need to be migrated to the new Microsoft Graph API. Most of this should have stopped working already. The full shutdown isn't until later in the year, so there will be potentially bits that still work. So potentially you've already seen this break, but just in case you have anything still running on there, please get those moved over. So they are officially retired as it stands. Another reminder is if you're using ID governance for guests, so for a long while in public preview, that was essentially free. There is now a small charge per monthly active user. And now we should reiterate that is monthly active users. So the other day I've seen an organization with 100,000 guests in their organization. They're worried about being able to do guest user cleanup reporting. So under ID governance, we have inactivity reporting, but you don't need to pay 75 cents for all 100,000 people because you might only have 1,000 monthly active users. So by paying for those 1,000 monthly active users, you can still do reporting on all of those other guests because they're not actually active. So you're only paying for those particular users in a given month who are using ID governance features. Now, and that is specifically to the ID governance SKU. So as before, if they're P2 features, so standard access packages, access reviews, those types of things, they won't be billed. But if there's any of the advanced features, so lifecycle workflows, for example, automatically assigned access packages, or the verified ID integration with access packages that we've looked at, so all of that will have a charge per monthly active user. But that is a fraction of the cost of full business users. So hopefully that is viable for many. Also to make clear, so if you have a multi-tenant organization, you don't need to license people twice. So as long as they have a license in the one of the organizations, then they can continue to use those ID governance features without a cost or without the extra license cost. So some other things, the conditional access overview monitoring tab, you may not even use this very much. Clearly it's not getting used enough to stay around. That is being retired, but there are obviously more insights and more intelligent ways of looking at any of these things as we've seen. So all those other enhancements to conditional access and the optimization agent hopefully fill the gap there for you. This one as well, the next one, legacy MFA and SSPR deprecation from the end of September. So I'm still seeing tenants that haven't moved over. If you're not using SSPR today, then there's not really any extra work for you to do. You just want to make sure you set up your policies in the new portal. If you are using legacy MFA, you will need to disable any enabled or enforced MFA. So that's the per user MFA. That used to be in a bit of a legacy looking portal. It has now improved, but ultimately that needs to be turned off before we can move over. Probably more critical for most is if you're using self-service password reset already. There are some steps to take in order to move that over. Now, the actual password reset screen where you configure registration, configuration, and the number of factors needed, etc., that will still stay there. But it's the authentication methods that people can use that will no longer be available in the old portal. So those things need to be migrated. If you go to authentication methods policies portal now and you haven't done it, you can see at the top there's a status. Basically, it may be not started, it may be in progress. In progress still respects the old policies as well. In order to move that to completed, you need to have essentially gone through legacy MFA, turned off any users that are using it, moved over your self-service password reset factors, and then you can complete that process and it will ignore those policies. What's nice about the new portal, SMS, for example, unfortunately is still required in some cases. We have problematic users who can't install Authenticator. Android users in China, in fact, can't use push notifications and Authenticator. So there's varying reasons to have SMS, unfortunately. But the nice thing is in the new portal is we can scope that. So rather than just have it on for anybody, we can scope it to specific user groups. So at least we can narrow the attack surface there. Same with phone call and everything else. So yeah, have a look at that. There's also a migration tool. So in the new portal, if you haven't done it already, there's basically a guide to help you to migrate those policies over. So that should help. Another portal that's going, so ID protection, identity protection, so that's your user risk and sign-in risk policies. So they have long been available in a separate portal or a separate screen to conditional access. So that is actually going away. For a long time, you've been able to configure those in conditional access anyway. And of course, you can be a lot more granular with those policies rather than just turning it on or off for a group. So they will, in fact, next week be read-only in the old portal. So if you're already doing it there, you won't be able to make any changes after next week. You will need to have fully moved anything over to conditional access by the end of October. So do keep an eye on that if you're using any policies that haven't been set up in conditional access already. Hopefully you've seen these ones already, but a reminder, anyone using Entra permissions management, unfortunately that is being retired from October. So already you can't buy it anymore. Any existing customers will need to stop using it by October. Microsoft have partnered with Delinea. They can actually assist you migrate over to Delinea, but the Entra product itself, unfortunately, will no longer be around. And for those MIM people, just another reminder, this end of life date doesn't look like it's going to change this time, so do bear that in mind. January 2029 for MIM end of life. So do start to look at Entra ID options in the meantime if you can. One other reminder as well, I often bring this up at events. Look at passkey, especially in Authenticator. So, you don't need to buy YubiKeys. You don't need any particular licenses. You can set these up already. So using, we can now have device-bound passkeys in Authenticator, phishing resistant, in fact. So even passwordless, the old phone sign-in method through Authenticator was not phishing resistant because you could convince someone to approve it. With device bound, you actually need to be physically present because your computer that you're signing into will use Bluetooth visibility to check that particular phone is actually nearby. So that's how somebody, an attacker signing in remotely won't be able to use this particular passkey to sign in. So like a YubiKey, you need to actually be there. And of course, what's nice about this is where, we do see challenges. We still recommend YubiKeys for many reasons and FIDO2 keys, but unfortunately they can be an expense for some organizations. So this is the next best thing. Hopefully, of course, you're already starting to use Windows Hello for Business on your Windows sign-ins. Platform SSO is the similar equivalent now on Mac available as well. So through all of these things, we can actually start to look at phishing-resistant MFA across all of your sign-ins. So, there may need to be some exceptions in the short term, but increasingly, whether you're signing in on mobile, signing in on an unmanaged device, signing in on a company device, we should be able to look at phishing-resistant MFA options. The bottom piece there, system preferred MFA, was in a Microsoft managed state. It seems to be getting enabled increasingly for people. So if you haven't enabled that already, it's worth looking at anyway. So this essentially means even if I have something like SMS or even Authenticator, standard Authenticator set up, the system will nudge me to use my strongest method, essentially. So if I have passkey, it will always be passkey. It doesn't mean, if a user doesn't have that credential available, they can still back out and choose another method that they have. But it just means that the user is nudged into the most secure method for most of their sign-ins. So one worth looking at once you go down this path. Now, this is what's next. Now, this isn't an unfamiliar screenshot, probably. This is in public Microsoft documentation. We had hoped to have some more interesting news for you. All I can say is that in the coming weeks, there will be some good news in this direction of travel. So, we increasingly are stuck in a hybrid mode. Some lucky people are 100% cloud, but for a lot of you will be AD minimized for a while. So watch this space in the coming weeks and months. There should be some useful changes that help get us to more of a 100% cloud, or at least AD minimized journey more easily without having to reinvent everything that we have already. Now, hopefully that's been of interest to you. I'm not sure where everybody is on their journey. There's obviously a lot going on around Entra ID, but with any of the things we've talked about, we can discuss with you. So, not just Entra, M365 as well, Intune, a lot of this falls into the same umbrella. Increasingly, identity covers all of those things as well, but particularly around Entra ID, identity and access, we're always welcome to have a call. We can talk about options available to you, go through any of the problems that you have already, and potentially look to do some wider work with you. We also offer Vision 120 calls where we can do a bit of a write-up with you, but do get in touch if you are interested in any of the things we've talked about today. Now, while I leave that there, I'm just going to see if we have any questions. There's a few on here. Okay, so the first one is around face check. So with all the AI image tools out there, is Face ID a safe concept, or has attacker tech already moved beyond this control? Ultimately, the company profile photo is what it is. Somebody could potentially get in, change that, download a new credential, but it's getting difficult. I mean, ultimately, they're not going to be able to use your particular device for that because you already have your company profile downloaded. But in any case, the actual match that's doing the live selfie it's doing, the reason it's using AI services is it's going to do some checks that it's not just a picture of me printed out. It's a moving video. It might be that I'm quite still, but ultimately there's some evidence that it's live. There's some checks that lighting is real. Yes, increasingly maybe these things are going to be harder to detect, but you're going to have to be able to come up with something that looks real, moves, and can be put in front of your camera as well. So maybe not impossible, but certainly the best thing we have at the moment. So next one is around Entra Suite licensing. Do you need a license for every user in the organization? That really depends what capabilities they're using. So, one of the main drivers of Entra Suite is ID governance. You may not need ID governance for everybody, but ultimately, typically you do, because if you're looking at lifecycle workflows, whether someone is a joiner, mover, or leaver, they're going to be impacted by that license at some point or by that capability. So they would need a license, even if it's not used on a regular basis. Entra Suite as a whole, again, depends what you're using. I mean, private access is a per user license as well. Maybe not everyone needs private access. Maybe you have specific use cases for certain applications to be accessed remotely. Maybe you have a VPN for most people and private access for some things, or as you move over, you could limit the number of licenses you need. But again, it depends on what you're using there. I should call out as well, I mean, the verified ID help desk stuff and face check stuff is in itself not necessarily licensed. So I know that sounds a bit vague, but you can use verified ID for free, the standard credentials. You can even use face check without additional licensing, but there is a per face check cost. So each face check that is done because of the AI services involved costs 25 cents. So again, depends how many how many staff you have, how many staff contractors are going to use this perhaps, but probably they're not going to be needing to do this every day. Hopefully it's a small cost on balance compared to the impact of an attack that causes more damage. The impact of Entra Suite, though, is if you do have Entra Suite licensing, you actually get 8 face checks per person per month included. And that actually comes out of a pool. So when you set up verified ID and face check in the verified ID area of Entra ID. If you have Entra Suite licensing, you'll see that you have, 100 of 200 face checks left this month. So they are pooled. So, you might have 1,000 Entra Suite licenses. That means you get 8,000 face checks per month. It could be that half of those people never use it and the other half use it twice as much, and that would, that's still counted. So they are pooled and you get 8 face checks per month. But the licensing, without the licensing, you can still go ahead and use it for sure. Which kind of relates to the next question as well. So, is verified ID and face check available for F1 for frontline licensing? Yes, it is, for those same reasons. So you don't need Suite licensing just to use face check. You can use it standalone. So that would be the same 25 cents per user per month cost. New question. Okay. What feedback are we seeing from clients on Authenticator passkey adoption challenges? We're stuck in Microsoft support hell with Windows security, QR code, unreliability, and CA enforcement questions. It is true that you do need to think about the configuration. I mean, if it's set up right, it does work quite nicely. I mean, you do need to look at your dependencies as well. I mean, not the oldest versions of iOS and Android won't support this anyways. That's the first thing you need to look at. In those cases, you might need to fall back to another type of passkey or phone sign-in potentially. But the device-bound passkeys, I think it's Android 13, iOS 15 and above. So that's one thing to check for adoption, first of all. In terms of enrolling people, what is nice that has changed, so if you enforce passkey as an authentication strength and conditional access, if you don't have one already, as would be the case in the past, it won't just block you. It'll actually take you through a guided registration screen. So similar to MFA registration, users are now guided on screen to set up a passkey. And if you're using Authenticator, as you'd expect, it should work quite well. So I'm not aware of any major challenges, but the same as any user adoption piece, you do need to give some good guidance. Again, that's something we can help with as well. We do have business transformation, user adoption services. So even if you've got the technical piece covered, we could help you with that. We do have some, templated guidance that we can issue to help you with that. But ultimately, you need to have a campaign around it, make people aware, and obviously have step-by-step instructions for the various scenarios. Is there a single document that articulates the issues, challenges with China? Not sure actually, but the main one that I've seen come up a lot is that Google services are not available in China, and Authenticator notifications on Android use Google services. So you can use TOTPs, time-based authentication codes in China, but anything that uses Authenticator push, so push MFA, phone sign-in, potentially passkey won't work. Well, passkey is going to be problematic anyway in China. So that's the main one. We'll look into that. I don't know if there is, but there is certainly information out there on the different types of challenges there are. Yes, there will be a recording of this meeting. So at the beginning, actually, we did mention that. So yeah, don't worry, that will be shared with you later on this week. I believe we have some new questions. Okay. No, in fact, that is everything. So I'll give it a moment just in case there's any more coming through. As I say, if you have any more follow-up questions, do continue to ask here. We'll get in touch with you offline. Or as I say, you can, of course, contact us on the details below. So we will, our frontline team will be able to route your query through to a necessary consultant or architect to help answer any other questions. Okay, so that looks like that's it for today. Thank you all very much for joining. I hope you've enjoyed this session, and please do reach out with any other questions you have.